the hidden psychological depths of fairy tales. Have you ever wondered why fairy tales never leave us? Their images echoing in our dreams long after childhood fades? Beneath their playful surfaces, these stories conceal layers of psychological truth maps for surviving and understanding the labyrinth of adult existence. Jung once insisted that fairy tales carry the collective, unconscious, archetypal narratives threading through humanity's psyche, uniting us in silent recognition of heroes, shadows, and unspoken desires. Modern life is a velvet cage, comfortable, but still a cage. Each fairy tale offers a secret key. Freud believed that these old stories, so innocent on the outside, are windows onto the forbidden rooms of our mind. They voice, in symbol, what society represses: desire, envy, fear of death, taboo wish. The wolf is not only threat, but the embodiment of everything we are told to bury. The pursuit of pleasure is not harmless. It can quietly enslave your mind, tricking you to ignore the battles raging in your unconscious. Nietzsche once asked himself, why so many men fear freedom? Today, this fear has only grown stronger. Fairy tales teach by myth and tragedy, by necessary illusions. They guide us not to comfort, but toward the collision between suffering and self-realization. What if transformation, pain, and identity were not social problems, but essential rights encoded in story, ignored by modern discourse? The archetypal journey, mapping the psyche's trials. Deep inside every fairy tale, there is not a mere plot, but a hidden map of the human mind. This is the first threshold. The adventure is not out there, but inside. Jung spoke of individuation as a lifelong challenge, the hero's odyssey to claim all aspects of the self. Yet, what most miss is that the dragons are never simply external monsters. They are projections of unacknowledged rage, forbidden desire, and frightening shame. When the tale places the hero before a twisting forest or a menacing witch, it is setting the stage for confrontation with the unconscious, those psychic territories most people avoid for a lifetime. Modern life rarely provides forests, dragons, or witches in literal form, but it is filled with invisible trials. These motifs echo through anxiety about the future, temptations we cannot speak of, and those sudden rages in the middle of the night. Jung's wisdom here rings clear. Individuation demands the journey through, not around, the inner darkness. If you feel resistance when facing something uncomfortable, consider that you are standing at the edge of such a forest, one mapped in myth, but terribly real in spirit. The hero's journey outlined by Joseph Campbell and deeply explored by Jung is more than a literary device. It is a lived psychological ritual. Each stage, the call, the refusal, the descent, the confrontation, the return, is an encrypted commentary on personal transformation. To reject any stage is to remain fragmented, repeating the same cycle. The dragon's defeat is never complete unless its secret is taken into the hero's heart and integrated. Otherwise, as Jung warned, what you resist persists. The fairy tale whispers this law. Every enemy outside is first seated within. Why do some symbols reappear in all cultures? The forest signifies the unknown, both terrifying and rich with potential. The witch is the keeper of forbidden wisdom, feared as much for her knowledge as her power. The dragon is the ultimate adversary. Its defeat means reclaiming every exiled part of the psyche. For those who walk modern streets but feel ancient fears, fairy tales offer a reflection. The journey is solitary, but never pointless. To face the ordeal is not a sign of failure, but the necessary cost of self-possession. If you sense that you are circling the same conflicts, drawn to the same restless patterns, you are not alone. Jung and Campbell, as well as the tradition of mythmakers, remind us, transformation comes not by elimination, but by brave integration. The story is a framework, a reminder that suffering, fear, trial, and triumph belong to every thinking mind. The invitation is to see yourself, not as broken, but simply as called. The map is there, hidden in the fables you remember. The trials await, but the gold is forged only in the darkest part of the journey. The shadow in the woods. The dark undercurrents of innocence. In the heart of every legend, there is a shadow moving quietly behind the hero. Fairy tales are not sanitized celebrations of innocence, but codes written out of darkness, each villain and monster, an echo of something primal in the human soul. Jung argued that the shadow is not the enemy. It is the reservoir for those portions of the self the conscious mind would rather exile. The witch in her cottage, the wolf lurking at the edge of the forest, the spiteful stepsister, these are embodiments of the traits we fear, envy, or condemn. The call to adventure is always followed by a confrontation with the forbiddens, and there is no true narrative of growth without facing what is most repellent or taboo. Contemporary society, in its quest for comfort and conformity, encourages the refusal of the shadow. Yet psychological research demonstrates what philosophy intuited for centuries. What is repressed grows stronger, gathering force until it finds an outlet, sometimes as an outburst, illness, or invisible weight. To repress the shadow is to fracture the psyche. To acknowledge it is to begin the difficult but redemptive project of wholeness. If you have ever been haunted by recurring dreams, strange compulsions, or the disturbing pull of a bad character in a story, you are experiencing the shadow's attempt to speak. Nietzsche, merciless in his artistry, saw the denial of inner darkness as one of modernity's most dangerous illusions. Tragedy, he maintained, purifies by bringing what is hidden to the surface, allowing society and the individual to navigate the abyss, not by denial, but honest encounter. Inside every nursery song or fantastical yarn, there is a coded alert beware, not just of external evil, but of the capacity for cruelty, weakness, and desire in your own heart. Suppress these realities, and you become unconscious prey to your own worst tendencies. Recognize them, and you may find a strange form of liberation. Scientific psychology, too, has mapped these dynamics. Freud named repression the invisible cornerstone of civilization, but also its greatest risk: anxiety, neurosis, and the compulsion to repeat what is denied. The child draws monsters with trembling hands, not because monsters are real, but because the energy they symbolize is as vital to psychic health as any positive ideal. The shadow in the woods, then, is not a thing to be slain, but to be seen and understood. Innocence, in this light, is not ignorance of evil, but the capacity to hold awareness of the full spectrum of the self. Fairy tales invite us into a paradox. Only by descending into the forest, risking encounter with the shadow, can renewal be achieved. The stories insist, sometimes harshly, sometimes with subtle compassion, that what is most terrifying is also the doorway to authenticity. If the wolf returns again and again to your thoughts, it is a sign that what you push away holds the key to your next frontier of growth. The path through the woods is dark, but those who walk it find not only monsters, but the beginning of understanding. Fairy tales as a language of desire and anxiety. The surface innocence of fairy tales is a carefully woven veil, hiding a language that speaks directly to our most vulnerable instincts. Freud argued convincingly that stories which enchant children also encode the anxieties and forbidden wishes of adults, often so powerfully that their meanings escape conscious awareness. The glass slipper is not simply a marker of beauty, but a symbol charged with longing and transformation. The poisoned apple embodies not only danger, but rivalry, guilt, and desire, all refracted into objects that seem innocuous to the untrained eye. Beneath the playfulness, these stories are arenas for negotiating taboo topics: sexuality, death, betrayal, and power. What society prohibits conversation about, fairy tales express in encrypted form. The wolf is hunger, sometimes sexual, sometimes existential. The sleep that overtakes the heroine is not harmless rest, but a metaphor for the dormant passions and terrors lying in wait within the psyche. Freud called this dream logic. A narrative can domesticate anxiety, making it tolerable without erasing its emotional energy. Psychological research supports this insight. Studies show that the creation and retelling of symbolic stories allows individuals to externalize, understand, and cope with suppressed fears. If you have ever felt an uneasy thrill reading Hansel and Gretel or Bluebeard, you have participated in this ancient dance, your mind working to resolve psychic tension safely in the space between fantasy and reality. The same mechanism operates in nightmares and compulsions, each one a fairy tale striving to be understood. Nietzsche and Jung both observed that myth operates as a mirror. What is most disturbing is not the story itself, but what it reflects about the audience. The popularity of certain motifs signals a collective reckoning with desires that modern norms insist must be hidden. The villain who tempts, seduces, destroys, or saves is always a cipher for the aspects of ourselves culture finds threatening. The tale's enduring power is its ability to handle what reality cannot discuss openly. If you find yourself drawn to or unsettled by a childhood story, it is not just nostalgia or irrationality, it is a signal. These tales are structured to transmit wisdom subliminally. You absorb lessons about life, loss, danger, and possibility, forming a psychic language that operates far below the level of words. The fairy tale, with its playful veneer, is thus also a coded warning and a guiding force. It urges you to pay attention to what society dismisses, what your mind shrouds in secrecy, and what your emotional landscape quietly struggles to name. The story is benign, but the feelings behind it are anything but. This paradox is its greatest gift, the key to recognizing that anxiety and desire are the twin engines driving human growth and the search for meaning. The role of suffering and sacrifice in transformation. Embedded within every fairy tale is an unflinching message about the necessity and inevitability of suffering. The stories we inherit from childhood do not shy away from trial and loss. Instead, they compose suffering as a tool, a crucible through which psychic growth must pass. Jung insisted that suffering was never a merely passive experience, but the engine of individuation, the force that breaks down the superficial self and forges deeper authenticity. When the innocent protagonist endures abandonment, poverty, betrayal, or physical hardship, the tale does not trivialize those pains. It echoes the reality that profound change is bought at the steep price of sacrifice. Nietzsche's philosophy exposes the cultural avoidance of pain as a denial of both wisdom and vitality. He refused comfort as a primary value, arguing that to affirm life, one must accept its tragedy fully. To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. Fairy tales mirror this lesson. The most dramatic transformations happen not in moments of serenity, but at the edge of disaster, the instant when everything familiar is stripped away. There is an alchemical power at play, transmuting agony into strength, vulnerability into presence, brokenness into new possibility. Psychological research has found that individuals who can narrate their hardships in story form, whether through therapy, writing, or myth, report greater resilience, coherence, and meaning. The ritualized pain of fairy tales offers a blueprint for this process. Crossing the threshold into difficulty is not merely surviving, it is claiming the experience, making sense of it, and integrating its lessons into the evolving self. The burning of bridges, the sacrifice of innocence, and the loss of companions all possess psychic significance. They are reminders that true rebirth is always earned in the flames. Whenever a fairy tale protagonist overcomes adversity, the victory is never total. It always carries the scars, the lingering memories, the altered perspective. There is no return to naive wholeness. Rather, the survivor has become paradoxically more complete by integrating what was once rejected, feared, or denied. In this sense, fairy tales do not teach escapism. They instruct the listener in endurance, clarity, and the eventual emergence of wisdom. The cost is real, and the journey long, but the possibility of transformation is encoded in every ancient narrative. Suffering and sacrifice, then, are not obstacles to be dodged, but invitations to participate in the deepest human work, turning painful experience into conscious strength. The Thales do not console by removing hardship. They dignify it, weaving struggle into the very fabric of growth. Each ordeal, each loss, is rendered not as randomness, but as an essential stage in the lifelong project of self-discovery. This is the inheritance of myth. Ordeals endured are never wasted. They are the hidden foundations of transformation, quietly shaping every chapter of presence and identity. The alchemy of symbols. How fairy tales transmute inner conflict. Fairy tales are not merely stories. They are alchemical texts, coded instructions for transforming hidden turmoil into conscious strength. Jung observed that the psyche works much like an ancient alchemist. Every fear, every forbidden desire, each piece of confusion or grief is the raw material to be refined into something luminous. The symbols that populate every tale, the spinning wheel, the locked tower, the enchanted mirror, are bridges between the inner world and waking reality, portals through which the darkest energies become visible, manageable, and ultimately elevated. The power of these symbols lies not in their literal meaning, but in their capacity to carry and transform emotional weight. Psychological research has shown that symbolic thinking allows us to access unconscious content safely, giving it recognizable shape without overwhelming the rational mind. Through narrative, what is most painful or shameful in our experience becomes approachable. We can wrestle with the dragon one night, caress the lost child the next. The imagery does not resolve the conflict, but it reveals its contours, drawing attention to what must be integrated or healed. The process is not one of violent elimination, but of subtle transmutation. Jung called this the opus of individuation, the work by which the undifferentiated parts of the psyche are not destroyed, but woven into a larger whole. The fairy tale is a kind of dream in waking life, a ritual enactment of this internal drama. The prince or princess is never whole until he or she has passed through ordeal, misunderstanding, or loss, and the magic often occurs only after a symbolic death and rebirth. The glass slipper, lost and found, is not just footwear, but the psyche's passage from incompleteness to unique identity. Viktor Frankl, writing from the depths of suffering, noted that meaning is always constructed from the material of adversity. Fairy tales do not erase hardship. They encode a method for enduring and transcending it. Every enchanted object or mystical creature stands for a psychic function: the power to endure, the wisdom to discern, the courage to integrate the shadow self. The act of naming and contemplating these symbols is an invitation to self-knowledge. As the story unfolds, the listener or reader is led step by step through an inner laboratory. Painful experience is distilled, its details exaggerated and compressed until its lesson emerges. The happy ending is never cheap or unearned. It signals not perfection, but the successful completion of a psychological experiment, the forging of ordered gold from chaotic lead. In this light, fairy tales are less about escape and more about mastery over what cannot be avoided. The ever-present shadow, the surfacing anxiety, the longing for transformation. Their wisdom lies in making conflict visible, meaningful, and at last, survivable. The paradox of order and chaos in fairy tales. Every classic fairy tale contains a quiet tug-of-war between opposing forces: order and chaos, law and rebellion, structure and wildness. The castle built on rules sits uneasily at the edge of a forest where anything might happen. Kings and queens protect what has already been attained, yet the story's real energy lies just beyond the walls. In places of unpredictability, the dark woods, the storm, the cunning stranger. Jung identified these polarities as the necessary duality of psyche. We seek safety and meaning, yet transformation emerges only where boundaries dissolve and chaos is allowed to speak. Nietzsche pushed this paradox to the extreme, arguing that creativity and strength come not from the comforts of civilization, but from the willingness to confront chaos directly. For him, the force that generates new life is the one that risks the unknown, breaks convention, and embraces the unpredictable. Fairy tales embody this lesson. The real adventure is never inside the castle, but in the quest into the unfamiliar, where heroes face not only external trials, but their own shifting selves. Scientific studies of human development mirror this narrative drama. Growth is observed where challenge and uncertainty push individuals to adapt, innovate, and expand their awareness. Too much stability or too much disorder is toxic. It is the balance Jung's coincidentia oppositorum that produces the richest harvest. In the tale, the hero often begins sheltered, but must venture beyond the comfort of the known. The return is never a restoration of old order, but a synthesis, new wisdom, greater flexibility, and acceptance that chaos and order forever dance together. The ongoing tension between these principles does not resolve itself neatly. Instead, it persists as the engine behind every meaningful choice and change. When fairy tales end in happily ever after, this phrase hides the ongoing negotiation between what is kept and what is risked, between the roles society expects and the authenticity the individual seeks. Real security, the stories suggest, is not the absence of danger, but the capacity to hold both structure and freedom in one's life. For anyone navigating modern existence, the lesson is unmistakable. The world will always offer castles and court systems of reward and belonging, but the roots of growth are nourished at the wild edge, where chaos challenges security and forces a deeper encounter with possibility. Fairy tales teach that order is only valuable when it makes room for chaos, and that true transformation comes not through perfection, but through the creative interplay of uncertainty, risk, and the perpetual struggle for meaning in a world resistant neat boundaries. The cultural and social facade, what fairy tales conceal about power and conformity. Fairy tales, far from being innocent entertainments, function as intricate mirrors for society's hidden structures of power and conformity. Every hero is tested not only by monsters and magic, but also by the silent laws of group identity and social expectation. Machiavelli would recognize the subtext. Tales teach strategies for survival and advancement in hierarchical worlds, masking obedience and rebellion alike within layers of symbolism. The kingdom, with its elegant order and strict protocols, is both refuge and prison, a place where reward is often predicated on fitting in, following the script, and wearing the mask. Beneath the narrative, fairy tales preserve and transmit collective illusions necessary for society's stability. Roles are assigned. Princes must save, witches must tempt, stepmothers must envy, and consequences follow both compliance and transgression. Yet, the deepest wisdom always slips through the cracks. Jung noted that mass psychology tends to absorb the individual, rewarding conformity while subtly alienating those who feel or think differently. The fairy tale subverts even as it instructs, offering brief glimpses of power taken or lost, authenticity claimed or denied. Nietzsche, always suspicious of herd morality, saw the hidden costs of belonging. In the tales, those who deviate breaking the rules or following a personal code either suffer greatly or claim a shocking kind of sovereignty. The story's undertone is clear. Authentic presence often provokes exile, misunderstanding, or conflict, yet it is the only path to meaningful influence and genuine self-possession. The social facade exists to protect order, but always at the expense of some deeper spontaneity and truth. Contemporary psychology affirms these literary lessons. Studies of influence, authority, and group dynamics reveal that social masks are essential for navigation, but hazardous for self-understanding. The tales encode warnings. What is unspoken in the kingdom is what most often returns to disrupt its peace. Hidden motivations, envy, ambition, longing for connection drive the plot, steering action behind the surface of roles and rules. Those who observe these patterns learn to see the invisible machinery powering society itself. At the heart of every fairy tale is a question. What must be sacrificed to belong? And what might be gained by risking disapproval, rejection, or solitude? The answers are never simple, but the stories insist on the necessity of making the choice. Power is given and taken. Masks are worn and discarded. Conformity is sometimes rewarded, sometimes punished. The enduring legacy of these tales is their double message. Survival may depend on playing the role, but transformation always depends on seeing through it. In the palace and in the forest, the listener is challenged to recognize not merely the outer story, but the inner code, the fragile balance between belonging and becoming. Conclusion: embracing the psychological wisdom of fairy tales. Fairy tales, when stripped of their decorative surface, reveal themselves as profound maps of the unconscious. Each narrative offers guidance for travelers through the darkness, those willing to confront fragmentation, uncertainty, suffering, and the relentless invitation to self-knowledge. Jung's insight stands at the center. Authenticity does not arise from comfortable illusions, but from the honest engagement with the shadow, the risk of solitude, and the persistent search for integration. The hero who survives ordeal does not return unchanged. Instead, each scar becomes a mark of new belonging, not to a group, but to a deeper tradition of thinkers and seekers. Nietzsche insisted on the bravery required to accept suffering as the price of becoming fully human. The seductive comfort of the familiar may soothe, but it also limits. To affirm life, one must look squarely at tragedy and shadow, discovering meaning through direct encounter. Fairy tales encode this lesson not for the naive or the passive, but for those ready to step across boundaries and endure the transformation that authenticity always demands. In the logic of myth, transformation is not an escape, but a passage. The listener finds, encoded in story, a ritual for enduring pain, facing social exile, remembering their power, and seeing through the facade of order to the creative core of chaos. The wisdom is in the willingness to walk these symbolic paths, not for approval, but for awakening. At the end of every tale stands an open door. The journey does not promise safety, belonging, or immediate understanding. It offers only the possibility of deeper awareness, of recognizing difference as strength, solitude as price, darkness as doorway, and authenticity as the silent act of rebellion that generates new meaning. Each person who listens and reflects is part of this ancient lineage. Each question, fear, and insight marks the next chapter in a life that refuses the comfort of illusion for the rare clarity of consciousness. As you return from this journey into the psychological depths of fairy tales, carry with you the enduring invitation. What will you notice differently when you walk into the room tomorrow? What hidden wisdom has your own story been waiting to reveal? The map is old, but the adventure is always new, and the courage to see beneath the surface will forever be the mark of those who truly belong.